First of all, let's understand the idea of abundance according to ourselves, to our times today. We usually relate abundance with the idea of having a lot of things. That when I say I have a very abundant life, is that we have many physical things in which we can rely to be safe, to be secure, and so on. Usually in our times, we relate abundance with wealth. But the idea of abundance is not specifically about physical things, it's more about things. What we are actually trying to say when we misunderstand the concept of abundance is accumulation. Accumulation is like the negative aspect of abundance. We are going to try to understand what accumulation is so we can kind of know in which way we can use abundance in a good way. Energy. Energy is the first exchange that we have in the universe. And this exchange at first is done through potentiality. The energy is a potential that the universe has within. And this potential gets out of itself, creating the kinetic. The kinetics is the energy that it starts to move from the potential. We have seen also that when the universe starts to expand and this energy starts to go everywhere, the universe starts to try to find different ways in which they could administrate that energy so it can be constant. This kinetic potential of the energy can be administrated in different ways. And that's what we call the law of conservation of energy. What we have been saying is that this energy is transpassing from the positive and the negative in order to keep the consequence, in order to find the constant of this energy. So it has to transcend itself once and again. So that's why every wave will try to find through positive and negative this way in which it can transcend the energy. Every particle, every atom, every molecule, every cell, they will try to pass the energy and exchange the energy in order to find the constant transformation. But in order to do so, what they have to do is to ensure that they have the energy to be able to do that transformation. In order to get that potential, what every particle has to do is to accumulate energy, to have that energy within. By law of conservation of energy, the universe will tend to find by polarity the reservoir energy, like to not to earn, to save energy. So this means that from the very tiniest particle in the universe, everything will tend to administrate, accumulate, and save energy. So the way in which they will save energy is by exchanging energy. So that's why they find other particles that resound with them. These particles create an organism, a molecular organism, to storage that energy. Something that we have to understand is that we are not different from the atoms. The atoms has designed everything that we know, everything that exists, even ourselves. We have been designed through the atomic realm in order to accumulate energy, to save energy. We are like different particles all together trying to accumulate energy. So this is why we keep the idea of those atoms. We are not different. From these atoms towards the entire construction of the universe, these atoms starts to build the organisms that creates life, and life starts to go through evolution. The system of the atoms go through everything until we arrive to the human point of view in which we still accumulate this energy. We accumulate this energy in our mind through beliefs, through ideas. We accumulate emotions through our feelings. We accumulate energy in our actions, in our body through eating, sleeping, and so on. In all nature, everything accumulates. Like the plants accumulate the energy of the sun, accumulates the carbon dioxide. They accumulate to make sugars. The animals eat and keep things for some seasons. The humans, we accumulate by eating, so we can have fat in order to have sugars for our survival. This is basically how nature does it. We accumulate energy. This tradition of accumulation in in nature is something that humans, we have inherited. And how? Because at first time, before we were a civilization, we were trying to organize ourselves in families, in groups, to try to survive. Throughout our entire history, we have the side cultures and traditions that kept that need of survival, which was to accumulate things in case that tomorrow we don't have them. Food, anything that could be good for us in order to not to suffer tomorrow. This has been through thousands of years that we have been suffering a lot. This became a tradition in our bodies, and we sometimes, some of us, we start to have this need of accumulate things just in case something happens. This is like someone that had lived a war. For sure, some of you, maybe you know someone that had lived a war, and they tend to accumulate food even under the bed. They tend to grab things from everywhere and accumulate it in the house just in case something happens in the same way as happened before with the war. This kind of things happens to us because we have lived those kind of situations. Sometimes we didn't live it by ourselves, but it is in our DNA. Through thousands of years, we have seen, and we can see that the people understood that the ones that were able to accumulate things, to have a lot of things, they had much more possibilities to survive. If you have many things, you can survive. And if you don't have stuff, you will die very soon. So this created the idea that whoever has many things is better. So we have to accumulate things in order to live longer. This is one of the beauty's idea, for example, in the canon that of beauty that we had after the Middle Ages, in the Renaissance. So I know that it's difficult to get this idea of speaking that we have a different way of abundance when we are talking right now that there is no hunger in the world as it used to be before. If we speak about the entire history, this is the first time in the last 100 years that there are much more people that can eat than the people that cannot. It doesn't mean that there is no people living in hunger. There are a lot of people living in hunger. But talking about history, not thinking about being the good Samaritan, thinking about history, this is the first time that we don't need to accumulate in order to survive. Now that we are getting another understanding of abundance, that we start to understand a different way of abundance, we can understand that abundance is not about accumulation of things in order to survive. That when you look back in history, our survival as a species was not because of accumulation. The survival of our species was because of sharing. Share is the concept of abundance, because the main key that makes the difference between these two words is that accumulation means to put a limit on the things that we hold. Like, this is mine and I accumulate this is my limit. And abundance, it's to go beyond the limits, which is the things that I have, they go over me so others can have it too. Is sharing the key of abundance. So it's not about having a lot of things and having so much that I can share with others. No, it's about having only one thing, and even though having the opportunity or the chance to share it. So abundance, it doesn't even have to be with an object. Sometimes what other person needs is a hug or someone that can listen to it. When we realize that we can also share with others things that are not physical, it opens new ways for me to be abundant. For example, someone that is having hunger, that doesn't have any food, if that person goes to a farmer and just by itself help the farmer with something, whatever, maybe the farmer will give some seeds for that person to sow and to create their own food or to share a meal. Abundance is not only about exchange of physical things, it's about sharing. Abundance, you get abundance by sharing thoughts, ideas, projects, emotions, feelings, sensations, and maybe tiny objects. Abundance is not related with material things. It's related to the ability of sharing things in between human beings, and that sharing can be in many different ways. So abundance would be to take your potential energy from inside, and instead of taking for yourself, share it, expanding it from your heart, giving it, sharing it with others, making this potential energy into kinetics energy. And when we do that, even if you feel that you have nothing to give to the others, you will be being abundant, because the person that you are giving that energy will give you energy back, and someone else will give you. The only reason why there is hunger still in this planet is because there are still people accumulating and people that doesn't know how to share. And I am not talking about the people who is up there with money and power. I'm speaking about the people that are here, the culture of humanity. It's about human culture, human tradition that made, and religious, that made the poor people, the ones that doesn't have anything, to believe that they need to wait for someone to save them, so they don't have to do anything. And it's about culture in our society that made us believe that we have to, it's a matter of a culture that makes us believe that we have to accumulate things and that we have to give to the others, in order to save them. Basically, it's basically something very cultural to believe that we have to survive ourselves, and thinking that it's someone from the outside that has to be in charge of what happens to others. Culturally, we have created systems, institutions that takes us the responsibility of taking care of the others. So the institutions like religion, governments, economy, they started to take care of the poor people, taking the rest of the people the responsibility of sharing with the others. So because society has created these institutions in order to take care of those who are in need, the same institutions that they were created to help, they understood something, that if they solve the problem, they don't have any job, they lose their position. So in order to take more power and to keep the work going on, they need to take care of these people, having them exactly as they were in order for them to take care of them. This is how the systems that were made in order to help, they become the same problem, because they start to create the need so they could exist. It's like if, for example, someone discovers how to heal all the diseases of the planet, all the doctors, the physicians, they disappear. We don't have medicine, we don't have doctors in the world. What the people have to do, the doctors have to do, create disease. If they don't create disease, they don't have job. This is exactly the conflict. The reason why we have governments trying to do this job is because we humans have not been taught how to share, because we have no idea how to share. We have been taught in education for other things, but not to share. That's why we believe in an institution like the government that is there in order to help everyone that needs. So we were taught to receive, not to give. We were taught to receive, so we depend on a system. And the moment that in which we have to give is called taxes, which is like imposition. It's something that is imposed by someone. And that's why we have conflicts and revolutions and chaos, because it's like a dictatorship. The main thing here is education. When in education we are taught to be abundant, we don't need governments, because we already know how to share. The governments are there in order to split the wealth, but we have been so concentrated in trying to survive, accumulating things and money and so many things, that we have not been taught in how to be abundant. So that's why we don't know how to share. A population that is abundant doesn't need a government. And this is not related at all with the distribution of wealth, because distribution of wealth is one of the biggest lies of human society. And I will try to explain it like this. So basically, the reason why the distribution doesn't work is because of what we spoke yesterday. We talk about energy. What is energy? Energy is the strength of a movement, of a work that you do. It means work. So this means that you have one energy inside, which is potential, and then you moved away outside. We moved in kinetics. So we are doing a movement with our own potential. There is nothing in the universe that only receives energy without doing anything in exchange. The universe is constantly doing something, every atom. So the idea of distribution of wealth, which is distribution of energy, cannot work unless all the other parts are also doing something. Because if you have a system in which something gives and gives and gives, and the other parts are static, that energy will lose. It goes against the law of conservation of energy. If there are beings or people that are statics, not doing anything and receiving, it loses the energy. And this is why all the systems in the governments that have been designed in order to distribute the wealth, they have problems in short term. They will have problems in a few years because it's not constant. It goes against the laws of physics. This is why we have problems all the time. Abundance is not given by someone giving energy to others. Abundance is given only by the action of the inner potential being shared with the others.